episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Welcome to episode 99 of the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. 99. Next week will be 100. I can remember how exciting it was to hit episode number 5. Designing and launching a professional website for your yoga business can seem overwhelming, especially if you don't know where to start. Kali Edwards, founder of June Mango, is a whiz at it. She talks with us today about how we can establish and showcase our brand on our website. And this goes way beyond the colors and the logo we choose. If you have been struggling with setting up a website for your business, this episode is a must listen with lots of great nuggets you can put into practice immediately. It is also great if you're thinking about rebranding or updating your website. Also, stay tuned because Kali has a special resource for all of our listeners, and you'll find out more about that as we chat. My name is Shannon Crow. I'm a mother of 3, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant working for yoga teachers. This podcast was created for you so that you can connect to information and ideas every single week and feel supported as you're out there doing the work as a yoga teacher. Driving to classes, planning classes, doing your accounting, answering emails, making playlists, not making playlists, whatever it is that you're doing to stay on top of things as a yoga teacher. I know that sometimes it can feel really messy. It feels like the jungles of yoga entrepreneurship. And that's why this podcast is here for you. If you are enjoying the podcast, it would mean so much if you could take a moment and leave a review. If you go to our show notes page, theconnectedyogateacher.com/99, you'll see a button right at the top that says leave a review. Before we dive in and meet Kali and hear about branding and our website, let's hear our hot tip of the week from John at Schedulicity because he has something new to share with us.
Hey, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is John with Schedulicity's Hot Tip of the Week. Word of mouth travels fast. Now your biggest fans have a new tool to help you get more students. With online group booking, you can now allow your students to book a place in your class for themselves online, as well as a spot for up to 5 other friends. Before long, your students will be showing their friends how nice it is to know in advance that you'll have spots in the class you want to take together. The only thing better than a happy regular is a happy regular who gets to share something they love with someone they care about.
Thank you so much, John and Team Schedulicity. Oh, and one more note here, Connected Yoga Teachers. Stay tuned at the very end of today's episode, and I will share some news about an event that is happening in Toronto in the spring. And Schedulicity is helping to promote the event and host the event, and I will be there, and it would be so fun to meet up in person. So I'll tell you a little bit more after the interview with Kali. So we've all heard that a website is a must-have for just about any business these days, and designing a professional-looking website for your yoga business can be a challenge, especially if you're not tech-savvy. Kali Edwards is a self-proclaimed introvert and the founder of Go Live in 5 by June Mango Design Boutique. She works with entrepreneurs to create gorgeous branding and website designs. Her designs are bold, fresh, and absolutely beautiful. With her Go Live in 5 process, she helps business owners design and launch their website in 5 days or less. Kali has always had the urge to create. She pursued a fine arts degree in college, then had a career as an agency art director, and ultimately started her own business in the industry. Originally from the Midwest, Kali currently lives in DC with her husband and her new baby. When she's not helping business owners with their creative endeavors, she enjoys biking to farmers markets, watching football, planning her next road trip, and buying way too many houseplants. That's what she said. I didn't say that. In this great interview with Kali, we talk about branding, content, and why it's so important for your personality and voice to shine through in your website. So let's dive in and find out how we do that. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Kali. It's fantastic to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited.
Tell our listeners what got you started on this journey of websites and branding.
Well, I I wanted to work with creatives because I've always felt like I am more creative, and I just kind of understood their brains a little bit better. So I worked as an art director at an agency for a little while, and I was working on these larger companies, brands, and websites, and I just was kind of feeling like I wasn't able to really be as creative as I wanted to be, and that they just kind of weren't the right fit for me. So I eventually kind of broke out on my own and started working with other people in the creative space, and that really sort of ran the gamut, and could be anything from photographers to life coaches to obviously yoga instructors, just kind of, and mostly women. I work with men too, but I tend to work with more women. And I just find that, I sort of, like I said, I understand where they're coming from because I'm kind of in the same space, and I'm running this little baby business on my own too. So I totally get it.
It's interesting that you brought attention to that, the whole creative side, because I hear from a lot of yoga teachers that they want to create consistent content and have this way to market and brand. And like you said, they find a struggle sometimes in being creative and sort of going with the flow. So did you feel kind of constricted in that way in your previous job?
I definitely did. And I think everybody has kind of a driver that really, motivates them to even get up in the morning, right? And mine has always been beauty, which sounds a little like, I don't know, oh, beauty, like everything needs to be beautiful. And that's not quite what I mean. I mean more, just things sort of being laid out well and being in their place. And so, for example, I also worked for a long time at a consulting firm, and we took this test, and many of my sort of colleagues were motivated by things like money or something else, and that's completely fine. But mine was beauty, and so no matter how much money my boss would want to throw at me to sort of keep me at that job, the thing that would really keep me there was if I could put a candle on my desk and design a beautiful logo. So kind of knowing that is really what helps me just kind of, run my business, I think, a little bit better. Sort of knowing yourself first is then you can kind of obviously help other people kind of get to know themselves and their brands too.
Oh, that's interesting. So that makes me curious about your workspace. Does it feel like it has to kind of be in order and be beautiful for you to find your best work?
Absolutely. I used to, my husband and I now live in a 2-bedroom row house, but we used to live in a tiny studio apartment. So I worked out of the studio apartment, and obviously, we kind of combined our bedroom and the living space and everything. And I really needed that dedicated space. And it was always something that needed to be well maintained, even though there were obviously a lot of other things happening around it. And even now, there's like our house is very old. So the closets for my husband are actually in my office. So when the doors are left open, I just can't, I cannot work properly because these doors are open and I can see all of his clothes and I have to shut them. And this is like one of those ongoing marriage things, right? Where I remind him kindly to close the doors and he can't remember, and it's fine, but I have to have them closed in order to sit down and start working.
Right. It makes total sense, like from a feng shui perspective, and a focus perspective as well. And I feel like your work really shows that. When I went to your website, so I heard it was from a yoga teacher had rebranded, and your name was at the bottom of her site. And then I clicked on that and went to your site and right away thought, wow, the branding is really clear. Like your message was so clear of what you do and who you work for. And that's what got me to reach out to you. And your website is also beautiful. So I think it's really playing out in the work that you do. And some people might think that creativity and kind of design, maybe we gravitate more towards that in a space, but I feel like your website, you've captured that. So it's pretty cool.
Thanks. Well, I think Also, this is a bit of just a design style on my part, but there's something about it being a little bit more minimal. And I feel that way, in the copy that's on my site, so any of the text that's there. And I try and kind of bring this out, and as I'm working with other creatives and yoga instructors and anybody that really, you don't less is more, basically. And I think that you can be really clear and concise at the same time, and that's actually really helpful. And then design-wise, almost like giving people room to breathe a little bit with their eyes is sort of what I'm always trying to bring into a website, including my own.
Right. So if you're working with, say, a yoga teacher, let's use that as an example because most of our listeners are yoga teachers, and they tell you that they want to do a website, where would you suggest that they start when they want to start planning it out? Do they do it on paper? Do they do it on the computer? Because you talked about the copy. Like, where do they start to kind of jot down, here's what I want it to look like?
Yeah, so I think this is almost a two-part answer, because it depends a little bit on if they're working with a web designer or somebody else to kind of help them build the site, or if they're going to kind of go it alone, DIY style. So I think that if you, and there's sort of a starting place for both that you can definitely use. So I always like to think of gathering content as the first piece of the puzzle. And that's especially true if you're working with the web designer, because, for me, I need that content in order to then be able to kind of put those pieces of the puzzle together. But you can do that too, even if you're doing your own site. So starting by kind of thinking through, and this is like the number one piece of advice that I give for both branding and web, is thinking about your audience. So who is it exactly that you're trying to attract, and getting really specific, because then you can write your copy and your text as if you're talking to them directly. And that's really, really helpful. And kind of writing it even conversationally. So a lot of times I think, we all went through grammar school, high school, college, and we had to write these papers, and they needed to be perfect and grammatically correct. But that's actually not necessarily helpful for when you're writing content for the web. You kind of want to write as if you're talking to a friend. And one of the pieces of advice I give for that is just to test it, is to really just read it out loud and see if it sounds normal. Like if you read it out loud and you kind of feel like you're reading a research paper, or you read that to a friend and they would be like, you don't sound like yourself. Then that's kind of the key to kind of go back and maybe rethink sort of what you've written so far.
Right. And I know how much of a struggle it can be when I go to put copy on my website. So say for instance on the homepage or the about page, and what a fantastic idea to think about reading out loud and writing how you speak. I think those are both really helpful.
Yeah, and it can be really hard. I mean, I think that honestly, the thing that people have the hardest time with, my clients and anyone that I talk to when it comes to building a website, is writing that copy. For whatever reason, it's a lot easier to find photos that feel like they're in line with your brand, or have a great design, or pick out your colors, or any of those things. Writing the copy, I think especially that about page, or where you're sort of talking about your practice or your expertise, people get a little uncomfortable. It's hard to talk about ourselves, number one, as if you're kind of bragging, but you do need to do that a little bit. People need to know that you're the expert in what you do, in order to sort of trust you. And the other thing is to always write in first person, because unless you do have a really large team or something like that, we know you're writing your copy behind the scenes. So it always feels funny to me whenever people are writing in the third person and they're like, Jessica has been teaching yoga for 15 years or something like that. I'm like, hi, Jessica, I know you're writing it. So you might as well say, I have been teaching yoga for 15 years. And that's great. I'm glad to know that. And it makes more sense to me that you're actually telling me that versus this sort of omnipotent person who seems to be writing your website.
Right. That's such a good point. And so you had mentioned to really think about who the website is for. And I think that is a key piece, and it can be pretty easy to go off track with that. So say, for instance, if I went on a traveling vacation and wanted to write a blog and do all of that, but my main focus is teaching one-on-one yoga in my hometown. So sometimes I'll go to different websites and think this feels a little disjointed. Like, who is this website for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you may have one or two different types of sort of ideal clients there, and I think that that's okay too. So it comes down to, and that's what I mean when I say getting super specific. So you really almost want to imagine who they are as a real person. So you may have worked with them already, and so you can actually imagine them as that person, as a previous client or customer, or you may need to kind of make them up in your mind and kind of imagine what they do all day. What are their challenges? Why is it that they're coming to you to learn and practice yoga with you? So for example, maybe your ideal client is a stressed out new mom who's been looking for holistic and healthy time just for herself, for example. So maybe she's looking, and the thing that keeps her kind of coming back to you is that feeling of calm that she gets after your class. And so if you allow your branding and your copy and sort of all of those things to reflect that calming effect, then that's the way that you attract that specific client. But sort of knowing her and what she needs is kind of the key to get you there.
Right. Well, that makes total sense. So you were saying also you had brought up the word bragging, and I'd like to dig into that a little bit because I feel like that's the most uncomfortable part. Say that mom, that stressed out mom is coming to class, it's such a value for her to go to that class, attend that class with that teacher, but yet that teacher might kind of, write, I teach yoga here and I do this and not really go into that. I don't want to call it bragging,
Well, it's not. It's not. And I think that I say that because I think that people feel that it is, but this almost maybe kind of speaks to a whole, another issue that women, I think, tend to encounter a lot, right? Where we feel like we need to be more humble, or just present ourselves in a way that's a little less out and clear, the sort of lean in effect, right? So, or lean in would be the opposite of what women tend to do. And I think that if you again think about talking to your friend, let's say your friend is the new mom and all she needs is a little bit of self-care, and you know that, and you can help her, you wouldn't shy away from telling her, hey, you should just come to my yoga class. We do a lot of meditation at the end, and I think that even just the breathing exercises and just taking this hour for yourself is really going to help you. And I make sure that we practice this, and this is why, I think it would really benefit you. That's not bragging, right? That's just sort of explaining what you do and how it can help her. So that's kind of the way I would go into thinking about it. But I find that people tend to think about it in the other way, in the kind of this negative way, and it feels to them like they need to brag, but they don't actually need to do that.
Right. Yeah, it's basically letting people know how you help people so they can sign up for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I think part of that too is knowing your own value, and maybe that takes a little bit of time. Maybe that takes a year or two or even more, depending on how you feel working in your practice, in your business. But it's definitely, you are bringing value no matter what. So we all want to share it with you, and you kind of have to tell us how to do it.
Let's say that a yoga teacher goes to sit down and gather the content, whether they have a plan in mind to meet with someone like you, a website designer, or they are doing it themselves and they get stuck and they think, gosh, I'm not really sure what my message or my brand is. Do you have a way to help people with that?
Yeah, definitely. So whenever I'm doing branding, I send out a little questionnaire, and this helps, for me, it helps me kind of get into my clients' heads just a little bit about what they like stylistically, but also, again, who they are and who they're trying to help. So I have this one tool that I find is the most helpful, and it's really just a fill in the blank sort of puzzle where you fill in a few pieces of your information, right? So it includes like your name, your specialty, your approach, but I'll go ahead and read it here because I think maybe it would be helpful for people to hear. Mm-hmm. And then you can basically fill in the blank. So for example, you'd say I'm, and then your name, and I'm your title. And I love to, this is your specialty. For clients like, your dream clients, whoever they are. So for example, that first sentence would simply be, I'm Kali and I'm a yoga teacher and I love to, work with new moms or something like that. And then the second part is, and they love how I blank. And this is your approach when we work together. But then the final sentence, and this is sort of where you're really digging in, is you say, but at the end of the day, what they really get is, and this is your deeper deliverable from them, because I'm more than just a blank, your title. I'm a blank. And this is your creative expertise. This is like your real sort of deep down what you're really giving them. So yes, yoga teacher may be this umbrella title, right? But your creative expertise is the deeper dive into it. And then you're kind of sharing what they really, really get when they work with you. So it could be like, yes, you may get better in your yoga practice, but what are you really getting? You're getting, as that mom, you're getting time for yourself so that you're a better mom to your kids when you go home an hour later, for example. So that kind of can help people.
Right. Do you find that people ever get stuck on that last part, being the expert in something?
I actually find that when I'm talking with someone, they may not be able to get there, but for whatever reason, filling in the blanks, they're usually able to pull that out, because it doesn't have to be really long. It doesn't have to be as specific. And actually, it tends to be a little longer. It tends to be more than the quick tagline, right? It can be a little bit more of a sentence. So I find that they're able to, let loose a little bit with that last sentence. And that kind of helps me see, okay, this is the real stuff. This is where we're actually going to kind of pull from. So the beginning is almost like the warm up, I'm name and I'm title, and this is my specialty. And by the end, we've really kind of struck the gold, I think.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting that it can be easier for people to write it down like that. What other things do you think really stump people when they go to make their website in terms of branding, and what could you offer to those people?
I think one of the other things that we run into a lot is forgetting that you have control over kind of how your audience moves through your site. So, you are creating the site, and in the end, you're creating those call to actions too. And call to actions is sort of web speak for a button or a link or wherever you really want them to click and kind of go next from whatever page they're on. So you really have the power to say, hey, if you land on my homepage, I really would like them to head on over to my about page from there. And they can kind of, again, see who I am, my expertise, etc. And then from that about page, maybe the call to action sends them over to your specialties page or even sort of your class descriptions page or something like that. But you can really guide them where you want them to go step by step by step so that they kind of feel like almost like you're online holding their hand a little bit, kind of walking them through who you are, what you do, and kind of how you can help them. So keeping that in mind is really useful. And you have the power, like I said, to sort of set it up that way. You just have to sort of be conscious as you're doing that.
Right. Oh, that's a really neat way to look at it. Instead of just, here's my menu and I have to fill all of these pages. What would I like the journey to be like when someone goes to my website? That's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think the other thing too is branding and bringing that to life on your site. And, branding, I think, can be kind of a confusing word. And some people think of branding as just the colors and the logo. And it is that, but it's also kind of understanding, again, digging into that mission statement, the who you are, what you do, who you do it for, even your why do I do this? And kind of sharing that, and then sharing it in a way that you're going to connect with your audience. So again, thinking about those colors, is this a calming color? Going back to the mother's reference, am I kind of sharing that this is the vibe that they're kind of going to get when they come to work with me in person? So you can kind of bring that into the website through style details and even just the way you talk. So, and by talk, I mean write, but, again, sort of say it out loud and then write it down. You can write it in a sort of calming way. My site, for example, is a little bit more fun and funky just because that's more my style, but it depends on, again, sort of who your audience is.
Mm-hmm. Ah, that's so good. And then what if people are feeling like, oh, my website is no longer speaking my message, or I want to do a rebranding? Like, how often do you see that? And what would you tell people who are choosing a brand with that sort of in mind? Is there a transition, or is this a forever thing? Like you have to make all the decisions and then you can't change your mind? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question that I think a lot of people have. Especially when it comes to websites, they're really kind of a living, breathing thing. So websites really should be getting updated pretty often. And even from a more technical SEO standpoint, having a blog or even just updating the content, even if you sort of have those static pages where they don't get updated that often, like the about page and the home page, updating it every once in a while, even just coming back for yourself, making sure that it still resonates with you and what you want to be doing and who you want to be working with is really, really important. But again, from the SEO standpoint, that kind of helps you in search rankings too. If you are feeling like, I just don't think that I'm working with the right clients, or maybe I've been working with these people and I kind of want to shift to doing something else. I think just take a step back and allow yourself, first of all, to feel that, because sometimes that can feel a little scary. Once you give yourself the room to sort of work through that mentally and emotionally, then you can sort of come back and say, okay, but what does that look like again from a design perspective? Or do I need to start from scratch, or can I just tweak the colors, or can I just tweak a few things or tweak the text? So it depends a little bit, on where you land with that, but you don't have to necessarily start over just because you've shifted a little bit.
Right. I think that's such a good point, because I often hear from yoga teachers and then they'll say, well, I want to put that workshop together, but first I have to get my website redone, the whole thing revamped. And I'm like, really? Couldn't we just do a landing page for this workshop?
Yeah, totally. And I think that scares people too sometimes is putting it out there before they feel quote unquote ready. But I'm very much in the camp of, just get something up. And this is coming from a web designer, right? But just get something up and let it be, just some sort of presence online where you can share at least the bare bones of what it is. And especially if it's a workshop, just so that people know it exists. You start doing whatever else you need to be doing behind the scenes. And you can always circle back to the sort of more technical or design detail stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so a couple of points that you pulled in. One, you mentioned minimalism, which I see on your website. Two is the copy and kind of gathering that copy and then condensing it down. So you'd already spoken to that. Can you give us an idea of why that is? Like when someone goes to our website, why is it that we want to condense things down and make it look minimalism style, sort of?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily, from the look and the style, it doesn't have to feel totally minimalistic. I mean, I think everyone's style is a little bbit different, but the thing that happens online, and I think we all know this because we experience it more and more every day, is we're honestly just a little lazy. We're used to the social media now and the super quick answers, and we just don't have a lot of patience for reading a lot online or really digging in. So you only have a couple of seconds to kind of catch and hook that audience member. So the clearer and more concise your text can be and everything, even especially on that homepage. And I always say, basically what you want to do on that homepage is put who you are, what you do, and who you do it for above the fold. And again, that's web speak for basically just that one part that they can see before they have to scroll or click or do anything else. So no matter what, they've seen kind of, again, the bare bones, the most important bits before they even have to do anything else, because they may not do anything else. You kind of have to catch them and hook them in, and then they can kind of go through your site. But the other sort of secondary point to that is that they're not going to read your whole site. If you think they're going to read your whole homepage and then read your whole about page and then read your whole services page, they're just not going to do it. Nobody has time to do that, nor are they deeply interested. Now, if they're really, really curious about you, they may come back and read through your about page or something like that. But they're probably not going to read your whole site. So putting in the most important pieces for each page, and especially higher up in the page, is going to be the key for that.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. I just read through an email the other day and I totally skimmed all the way to the bottom. And then there was this kind of condensed version at the bottom, like for you skimmers.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's
Just
what
don't
you.
have patience for whatever reason anymore. We get bombarded by so much media all the time. I think people are a little impatient and tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens to me if I see a big thing of text. I'm like, oh, unless it's in a book and I have time at the end of the day and I'm holding the book. But online, my reading habits are completely different. So that's a great point.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a little bit in addition to content. So we've talked about copy and speaking to your audience and obviously your sort of branding and logo, but you can do this in photos too. So both bringing in the vibe through your photos, and you can by bringing in photos, that's a good way to engage with your audience without making them read. So you can still kind of communicate through your photos or any sort of design details that are visual. So keep that in mind too. It's not like you have to only have copy and a super simple photo on the site. You can definitely have lots of photos, and that can really help just keep people kind of interested.
Right. That's such a good point. Do the photos all have to match then in terms of color wise or?
I am going to say yes. I feel like it's.
I knew you were going to say that.
So I think it doesn't have to necessarily be color, but if you are trying to be pretty conscious of your branding and that style and those colors that you're working with, then I think that that's helpful. But again, going back to the vibe and the feeling, I think that's sort of the key. That's the thing that we are constantly thinking about, because again, that comes back to the ideal audience and how you are attracting them. So it's in the same way that when you talk to a person in real life, right? It's not just the words. They can look in your eyes, they can see your body language. You engage in a couple different ways. So you kind of need to do that online too. So the photos don't necessarily have to be blue just to be calming. There are certain photos, and you can sort of tell sort of how you feel and the vibe you're getting from those photos if you're trying to have that calming effect. It's sort of nice if they're kind of in the same tones. So, if for example, you have photos that feel a little faded or subdued or something like that, then I think that's kind of helpful to keep in line. Don't have one that's super, super saturated and then, you scroll down the page a little bit and it's really, really muted. So that consistency is helpful. It doesn't have to be like all the same colors though.
Right. This is so good for someone like me as well. I just walk out of my room and then I ask my daughter, how's this? She's 13 and she helps me a lot, like with matching. No, Mom, that doesn't match at all. So some days I'm like, I don't care. And other days I just go to her. I think that she has an eye. I even do it with the website as well. I'm like, well, how does this look? She has a really good eye for it. But I feel like it's not my strong suit.
Yeah, and that's a really good, tip too, is again, if you're DIYing it, you don't have to do it alone. And I would recommend not, you don't do it in a bubble. Ask people what they think, get some feedback on it, have somebody read through it, make sure it makes sense, make sure it sounds like you, make sure, the layout feels sort of right, doesn't look wonky. Because obviously that's the other thing that makes it a little bit tough is that, you get into it and you're staring at it all day for hours or something, and then you just almost can't see it anymore. So asking people to lend you a hand in terms of their opinion, I think can be really helpful.
That's a good point. And so you must do that for people when they have their website and they just want that feedback. And then you also design right from start to finish.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So I basically offer sort of two services. And one is where it's like the whole shebang, right? Where we go from branding and logo and take it all the way through and build that out and build this big old website. And then sometimes people, like you said, they've had a site, maybe they're shifting in who they're serving or their messaging. And so they just kind of need to refresh and take it up a notch or whatever it is. So then we can take what they already have, and they may be able to keep all their copy, for example, and they just need to swap some photos and some layouts, and then it feels like a brand new site. So it just depends a little bit on where you're at and what you need.
Right. And so if people want to find you, how do they do that?
So you can find me at golivein5, that's the number 5.com. Basically, because my service is we build a website out in 5 days and then you're ready to rock. So golivein5.com. Same thing on Instagram. That's my main social media. I feel like I can only do one social media well, so Instagram is it.
Okay, good to know. I know. I feel like Facebook is mine, and I try and stretch my Instagram muscles. I'm trying a little bit more, but I feel like same thing. I can only be on one effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And, maybe that's where your ideal audience is again, too, just to bring it all back to audience again and again so that it's very clear that that's important.
It's so true. Is there anything else that you would tell someone who feels like they're kind of stuck on the branding journey?
I think maybe the last thing would just be, we talked about audience, but coming back to that, maybe emotion is really what you're looking for. If you're feeling stuck, like, how do I even find them or connect with them? Or I know who they are, but I don't know how to connect with them. Thinking about that emotional connection that your yoga expertise has with your clients, that's really going to be the key to helping you put all the pieces of the puzzle together with branding and everything else. I think it's, you can create that connection through everything that you're doing, from your layout to your colors to your copy.
Right. Oh, that's really interesting. Emotions. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Kali. That was a lot of information, and I have to say that I have some key takeaways that have given me some website homework. Connected Yoga Teachers, I want to hear from you. What were your key takeaways? One of mine was that I need to write my About Me page in first person. I went back and checked it and thought, no, there's no way that I wrote it in third person, but I did. I also love this Mad Lib example of how to get into our own branding message that Kali has shared, and she has created a really beautiful PDF, and it's in our show notes. So you can find it at theconnectedyogateacher.com/99. And I think my last key takeaway is this idea of a call to action on your website. Asking 2 questions to yourself now. What is the main call to action for your website? What is the main thing that you want anyone to do when they go to your website? And also, what is it for each and every page of your website? If you are wanting to meet up in person, I'm going to be at the Toronto Yoga Show, March 28th to the 31st, 2019. And big news this week, Schedulicity has just confirmed that they are hosting a gathering for us connected yoga teachers at the Ritz Bar during the Toronto Yoga Show. So this is going to happen March 29th from 6 to 8 p.m. That's 2019. And this is our private party, so we can hang out for a couple of hours. There will be food and drinks, thanks to Schedulicity, and lots of time to connect in person and chat. If you are wanting to study with me, I teach Mama Nurture both in Bermuda and in Meaford, Ontario. You can find all of that information on theconnectedyogateacher.com. Just look for trainings. And I'm also sharing a 20-hour Yoga for Pelvic Health yoga teacher training November 2nd and 3rd in Meaford, Ontario. And before I sign off, I want to say a big thank you and a shout out of thanks to 2 people who left us a review. Canadian Yoga Woman from Canada said, "This podcast is one that I look forward to every week. The information and topics are relevant, well-researched, and interesting. I learn a lot listening, and Shannon's audio quality is very clear." Thank you so much for sharing that. Also, Pixie ACIM from the United States says, "Shannon's podcast has been fueling my yoga business and life for a while now. Her solo episodes are highly valuable, and her guests bring new and insightful perspectives that help me greatly. I highly recommend this podcast to yogis." Thank you. It means so much when you leave a review. You can do that either on iTunes or on our Facebook page. Thank you also to our team, Samantha, Suzanne, and Crunch, and to our sponsor, Schedulicity, for making today's episode possible. Most of all, thank you, dear listener. You make this podcast happen. Okay, Connected Yoga Teachers, it's time to sign off, but before I do, I want to know what you will be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, to your yoga practice, and to your community, so that you can really show up and share the yoga that lights you up.